The morning air buzzed with the hum of downtown chatter, a chorus of conversations in countless languages that seemed to sing of hope and hard work. Rosa stepped off the bus, clutching her oversized purse, its frayed edges a quiet testament to years of wear and careful stitching. Today was just another day, she told herself, a routine mix of juggling shifts at 2 jobs and squeezing in an hour at the community center's English class before returning home to her daughter, Sophia. The cafe she frequented wasn't glamorous, but it had decent coffee and a corner table where she could review her English phrases. Rosa hesitated briefly at the door, inhaling deeply to calm the usual nerves. Her English wasn't perfect, but she tried. Every day, she tried. She adjusted the scarf around her neck, as if it could shield her from whatever lay inside, and stepped in. The cafe was bustling, a microcosm of the city. College students hunched over laptops, a group of construction workers laughed over breakfast, and an older couple shared a quiet conversation. Rosa approached the counter, her heart picking up speed as she rehearsed her order silently. She smiled at the barista, a young woman with a piercing above her eyebrow, and started to speak. "Ugh, good morning," Rosa began, her accent thick, but her tone warm. "I would like, a coffee, no milk, and, she searched for the word, a muffin, please." The barista smiled politely, but before she could reply, a man 2 spots behind Rosa let out a loud, exaggerated groan. "Oh, come on. We don't have all day," he barked, his voice cutting through the air like a whip. Rosa froze, her face flushing as heat crept up her neck. The barista's smile faltered, but she said nothing, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. The man, a stocky figure in his 40s with a loud voice and a louder personality, wasn't finished. "If you're gonna live here, at least learn the language. It's called English." His words hit Rosa like a blow, each syllable sharpening the humiliation clawing at her chest. A few heads turned. Some looked away uncomfortably, while others smirked, caught in the spectacle of it all. Rosa's hands trembled as she fumbled with her wallet. She wanted to disappear, to shrink into herself until she was no longer there. Words escaped her. The phrases she had practiced 100 times in front of the mirror dissolved into a fog of shame and anger. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. And then, out of nowhere, a voice cut through the tension, firm yet measured. "That's enough." The room seemed to hold its breath. The man turned, clearly surprised to be challenged. Standing near the corner of the cafe was Mr. Dawson, a retired teacher whose weathered face carried the wisdom and kindness of years spent in classrooms. His quiet demeanor often made him invisible in the hustle of city life, but today he was anything but. Mr. Dawson stepped forward, his gait deliberate, his eyes locked on the heckler. "She's ordering her coffee just fine," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "And even if she wasn't, that's no excuse for treating someone like this." The heckler snorted, a mix of disbelief and indignation. "Oh, great, the language police," he sneered. "Look, old man, I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking." "No," Mr. Dawson replied, his tone unyielding. "You're saying what you think, and you're wrong. Learning a new language takes time, courage, and effort, something you clearly know nothing about." A ripple of murmurs spread through the cafe. Some patrons avoided eye contact, while others nodded in silent agreement. Rosa stared at Mr. Dawson, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't explain. It wasn't just gratitude, it was awe, the kind that blooms when you see someone step into a storm they didn't have to face. The heckler, visibly irritated, took a step closer to Mr. Dawson. "Who the hell do you think you are? Defending her like some kind of hero. She needs to toughen up if she's gonna live here." Mr. Dawson didn't flinch. "And you need to learn respect if you're going to live anywhere." For a moment, the 2 men stood in silence, a standoff of opposing wills. The heckler opened his mouth to retort, but seemed to think better of it. With a muttered curse, he grabbed his things and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The cafe seemed to exhale all at once. Rosa's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them away, determined not to cry in front of strangers. Mr. Dawson turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Rosa nodded, though her voice wavered when she spoke. "Yes, thank you. I thank you." The barista, who had been watching with wide eyes, quickly finished Rosa's order. "It's on the house," she said, sliding the coffee and muffin across the counter. Rosa tried to protest, but the barista shook her head. "It's the least we can do." As Rosa took her seat in the corner, she noticed something she hadn't before. People were smiling at her. The older couple near the window gave her a small nod, and a young woman at the next table mouthed, "You're amazing." Rosa wasn't sure what she had done to deserve their kindness, but it filled her with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Mr. Dawson approached her table, carrying his own coffee. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Rosa hesitated but then gestured to the empty chair. "Please." They talked for a while. About her daughter, Sophia, who was just starting second grade. About Mr. Dawson's years as a teacher and how he had seen too many students bullied for being different. Rosa found herself laughing at his dry wit, the tension of the morning slowly ebbing away. But beneath the laughter, Rosa couldn't shake a lingering question. Why had he stood up for her? She finally voiced it, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you do that? You didn't have to." Mr. Dawson smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Because I've seen what silence does. When we stay quiet in the face of cruelty, we're complicit." And because he added, his voice softening, "I've been in your shoes. My parents came to this country with nothing but their accents and their dreams. People like him tried to tear them down too, but they didn't let it stop them, and neither should you." Rosa's chest tightened. She had never thought of herself as brave, but hearing his words, she felt something shift inside her, something she couldn't quite name but knew she wanted to hold on to. The cafe began to empty as the morning rush faded, but Rosa and Mr. Dawson stayed, their conversation weaving a tapestry of shared stories and quiet understanding. When they finally parted ways, Rosa walked out into the crisp air with her head held a little higher. She didn't know what the rest of the day would bring, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could face it. What Rosa didn't know was that the incident hadn't ended in the cafe. A bystander had filmed the confrontation, and by evening, the video would be all over social media. The world was about to learn Rosa's story, and it would ignite a chain of events that would change her life and her community forever. The sun dipped low over the city as Rosa walked home, clutching her bag tightly against her side. Her mind churned with a mixture of emotions, relief that the morning ordeal had ended, gratitude for Mr. Dawson's intervention, and an underlying sense of unease about the attention it had drawn. She replayed the scene in the cafe over and over, her cheeks still burning from the humiliation. But intertwined with the shame was the image of Mr. Dawson standing firm, his voice unwavering as he defended her. She had never encountered someone like him, someone willing to stand up for her without hesitation. When she arrived at her apartment, Rosa was greeted by the familiar squeak of the front door. Inside, her daughter Sophia was seated at the small kitchen table, crayons scattered around her as she worked on a drawing. "Mom," Sophia exclaimed, running to her mother and wrapping her small arms around her waist. Rosa hugged her back tightly, the weight of the day momentarily lifting. "What are you drawing, mi amor?" Rosa asked, setting her bag down and examining the colorful paper. "It's us," Sophia beamed. The drawing depicted Rosa and Sophia holding hands beneath a bright sun. Above them, in bold, uneven letters, Sophia had written, "My mom is brave." Rosa's chest tightened. "Why do you think I'm brave?" she asked softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from Sophia's face. "Because you always try, even when it's hard," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "And because you make everything better." Rosa blinked back tears, moved by her daughter's innocent words. If only Sophia knew how often Rosa felt like she was failing failing to learn English quickly enough, failing to earn enough money, failing to be enough. But tonight, she decided to push those thoughts aside. Tonight, she would let herself believe Sophia's words. As Rosa prepared dinner, the buzz of her phone interrupted the quiet. She wiped her hands on a towel and checked the screen. There were several messages from coworkers and friends, all containing links to the same video. With a sinking feeling, she clicked on one. The grainy footage was unmistakable. It showed the confrontation in the cafe, starting with the man's mocking outburst and ending with Mr. Dawson's firm stand. The video had been shared on a local news page and was rapidly gaining attention. Comments flooded in below the post, a mix of support and vitriol. Some praised Mr. Dawson for defending Rosa. "This man is a hero. We need more people like him. Rosa's courage is inspiring. Learning a new language is hard. Respect to her." Others, however, sided with the heckler. "If you can't speak English, don't hold up the line. Mr. Dawson is just a bleeding heart trying to score points. Rosa needs to toughen up." Rosa's stomach churned. She hadn't asked for this attention. She didn't want to be the center of a debate about who belonged and who didn't. But as much as she wanted to turn off her phone and pretend the video didn't exist, the messages kept pouring in. Later that evening, Rosa received a call from her friend Marta, a fellow immigrant who worked with her at the cleaning service. "Rosa, have you seen it?" Marta asked, her voice a mixture of excitement and concern. "I've seen it," Rosa replied, her tone subdued. "I don't know what to do." "You don't have to do anything," Marta assured her. "Just let it pass. People will forget in a few days." "But Rosa," she hesitated, "it's not a bad thing, you know. Maybe this is a chance for people to understand what we go through." Rosa wasn't so sure. She had spent years trying to avoid attention, blending into the background as much as possible. But now, she felt like her life was on display for the entire city to judge. The next morning, Rosa debated skipping her English class. She worried that her classmates, many of whom had likely seen the video, would treat her differently. But Sophia's words from the night before echoed in her mind. "You always try, even when it's hard." Summoning her courage, Rosa walked into the community center with her head held high. The class was abuzz with whispers when she entered. Her teacher, Miss Patel, greeted her warmly. "Rosa, it's good to see you. How are you holding up?" Rosa shrugged, unsure how to answer. "It's a lot." Miss Patel nodded knowingly. "I can only imagine. But you should know that many of us are proud of you. It takes courage to face what you did." Rosa took her seat, grateful for Miss Patel's kindness. As the lesson began, she tried to focus on the words and phrases, but her mind kept drifting to the cafe and the video. During a break, one of her classmates, a young man named Ahmed, approached her. "Rosa," he said hesitantly, "I saw the video. What that man said to you, it wasn't right. I just wanted to say you're not alone. A lot of us have been through something similar." Rosa looked at Ahmed, surprised. "You have?" He nodded. "All the time. People think because my accent is different, I'm not smart or capable. But we can't let them define us, you know. We have to keep going." His words resonated with Rosa. Maybe Marta and Ahmed were right. Maybe this was an opportunity, not just for her, but for others like her. As the days passed, the video continued to circulate. Local news outlets reached out, asking to interview Rosa and Mr. Dawson. At first, Rosa declined, overwhelmed by the idea of speaking publicly. But Mr. Dawson, ever patient and supportive, encouraged her to reconsider. "Rosa," he said during one of their conversations, "this isn't just about you. It's about showing people what empathy and understanding look like. Your story could inspire others to stand up against injustice." Rosa thought about Sophia, about the example she wanted to set for her daughter. Slowly, she began to see the truth in Mr. Dawson's words. Maybe she could turn this unwanted attention into something meaningful. When Rosa finally agreed to an interview, she was nervous but determined. The reporter, a young woman named Elena, came to Rosa's modest apartment, setting up her camera in the small living room. Sophia watched from the corner, her wide eyes filled with curiosity. Elena started with a simple question. "Rosa, how did you feel in that moment at the cafe?" Rosa took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I felt small," she admitted, "like I didn't belong. But then Mr. Dawson stood up for me, and I realized I'm not alone. There are people who believe in kindness and understanding." As the interview continued, Rosa spoke about her journey, leaving Ecuador, learning English, and working tirelessly to build a better life for Sophia. She shared her struggles but also her hopes, her dreams of one day opening her own small bakery. The interview aired that evening, and the response was overwhelming. Messages of support poured in from people across the city and beyond. Local businesses offered to sponsor English classes for immigrants, and a crowdfunding campaign was started to help Rosa achieve her dream of opening a bakery. But not everyone was supportive. Some continued to criticize Rosa, accusing her of seeking attention or refusing to assimilate. Rosa struggled with the negativity, but with Mr. Dawson and Sophia by her side, she found the strength to keep moving forward. One evening, as Rosa was preparing dinner, she received a knock at the door. When she opened it, she was shocked to see the man from the cafe, the heckler. He looked uncomfortable, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "I'm not good at this," he began, his voice low. "But I wanted to say, I'm sorry. I was out of line. I didn't mean to hurt you." Rosa stared at him, speechless. She had never expected an apology, especially not from him. After a long pause, she nodded. "Thank you," she said simply. The man hesitated before continuing. "What you said in the interview about your dreams, I think that's brave. I hope you make it." As he walked away, Rosa felt a mix of emotions, relief, surprise, and a glimmer of hope. If even someone like him could change, maybe the world wasn't as divided as it seemed. That night, Rosa sat with Sophia, helping her with homework while envisioning a future she had once thought impossible. The cafe incident had been a turning point, not just for Rosa, but for the entire community. And while the road ahead was still uncertain, Rosa knew one thing for sure: she would keep trying, no matter how hard it got. For Sophia, for herself, and for the countless others who faced the same struggles, she would keep going. The city hummed with an energy Rosa had never quite felt before. Since the interview aired, it seemed as though everyone had an opinion. On her, on Mr. Dawson, on what it meant to be a part of the community. Her life, once quiet and unnoticed, was now the center of a story she hadn't asked to tell. The cafe incident had become a flashpoint for something bigger, and while she felt pride in sharing her journey, she couldn't ignore the weight of it all. Rosa's days were no longer ordinary. People stopped her in the streets to offer words of encouragement or share their own experiences of struggle and resilience. At the same time, there were those who avoided her altogether, their glances cold or judgmental. On one particularly difficult morning, as Rosa walked Sophia to school, a car slowed down beside them. For a brief moment, she thought the driver was stopping to ask for directions, but instead, he rolled down his window and shouted, "Go back where you came from," before speeding away. Sophia flinched, gripping her mother's hand tightly. Rosa's heart sank, but she forced herself to stay calm for her daughter's sake. She knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from Sophia's face. "Are you okay, mi amor?" she asked gently. Sophia nodded, though her eyes brimmed with tears. "Why are people so mean, Mom?" she whispered. Rosa hugged her tightly, her own voice trembling as she replied, "Not everyone understands, Sophia, but we can't let them make us feel small. We have to be strong, for each other." After dropping Sophia off at school, Rosa sat alone on a park bench, her thoughts swirling. She had never asked for this spotlight, but it was here, and she couldn't escape it. The question was, what would she do with it? She thought of Mr. Dawson, his quiet confidence and unwavering resolve. If he could stand up for her, Surely she could find the courage to do the same for others. Later that day, Rosa returned to the community center for her English class. The atmosphere was different now, warmer, more welcoming. Her classmates, many of whom had seen her interview, greeted her with smiles and encouraging words. Ahmed, who had become a friend in recent weeks, sat beside her and gave her a thumbs up. "You're famous now," he teased, his grin wide. But in a good way. Rosa laughed softly, though the word famous still felt strange to her. She was just Rosa, a woman trying to make her way in a world that often felt unkind. But if her story could bring even a little bit of kindness to that world, maybe it was worth it. As the class progressed, Ms. Patel introduced a new activity: public speaking. The mere thought of standing in front of a crowd made Rosa's palms sweat, but Ms. Patel's words were reassuring. "This is about practice," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "About finding your voice. Each of you has a story worth sharing, and the more you practice, the easier it will become." When it was Rosa's turn, she hesitated, her mind racing with doubts. But then she thought of Sophia, of the drawing that now hung on their refrigerator. "My mom is brave." Taking a deep breath, she stood and began to speak. "My name is Rosa," she said, her voice trembling at first, but growing steadier with each word. "I came to this country for my daughter, to give her a better life. Learning English is hard, but every day I try, because I believe in what is possible." The room erupted into applause when she finished, and Rosa felt a surge of pride she hadn't known she was capable of. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, not as someone to be pitied, but as someone with strength and worth. That evening, Rosa received a call from Mr. Dawson. He had been invited to speak at a town hall meeting about diversity and inclusion, and he wanted Rosa to join him. The thought of speaking in front of such a large audience was daunting, but Mr. Dawson's confidence in her was unwavering. "Rosa," he said, his voice steady and encouraging, "your story matters. People need to hear it, and you're the only one who can tell it." Rosa agreed, though her nerves threatened to get the better of her in the days leading up to the event. Sophia, sensing her mother's anxiety, made another drawing. This one of Rosa standing on a stage, a microphone in her hand. Above it, Sophia had written, "You can do anything, Mama." The night of the town hall arrived, and Rosa stood backstage with Mr. Dawson, her heart pounding. The auditorium was packed, the buzz of conversation filling the air. Local leaders, business owners, and residents from all walks of life had gathered, eager to discuss the issues that had come to light in the wake of the cafe incident. When Mr. Dawson took the stage, the room fell silent. His speech was thoughtful and impassioned, weaving together stories from his years as a teacher with a call to action for the community. Then, he introduced Rosa. Rosa stepped forward, the lights glaring and the faces in the crowd blurring together. She clutched the edges of the podium, her hands trembling. But as she began to speak, she felt a calmness wash over her. She spoke from the heart, sharing not just the story of the cafe, but the larger story of her journey, her hopes, her fears, and her dreams for Sophia. "I know what it feels like to be invisible," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "But I also know what it feels like to be seen, to be heard. And I want that for everyone, no matter where they come from or what language they speak." The audience erupted into applause, some even standing. Rosa felt overwhelmed but grateful, her heart full. As she stepped off the stage, she caught Sophia's eye in the front row, her daughter beaming with pride. In the days that followed, the town began to change in small but meaningful ways. The cafe where the incident had occurred started hosting language exchange nights, inviting residents to share their languages and cultures. Local businesses partnered with the community center to offer free English classes, and a new sense of unity began to take root. For Rosa, life didn't magically become easier. She still faced challenges, still struggled with doubts. But she also discovered a strength she hadn't known she possessed. A strength that came from standing up, from speaking out, and from believing in herself. One day, as Rosa walked Sophia to school, a woman stopped her on the sidewalk. She introduced herself as Maria, a fellow immigrant who had been inspired by Rosa's story. "Because of you," Maria said, her voice trembling with emotion, "I finally signed up for English classes. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to try." Rosa smiled, her chest swelling with pride. "It's never too late," she replied, her voice full of conviction. "And you're stronger than you think." As Rosa continued down the street, hand in hand with Sophia, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The cafe incident had been a turning point, not just for her but for the entire community. And while the road ahead was still uncertain, Rosa knew one thing for sure. She would keep moving forward, one step at a time. For Sophia, for herself, for everyone who needed a little more courage to believe in what was possible. The morning of the town hall's aftermath dawned quiet, but a sense of change lingered in the air. Rosa woke up early, sitting by her small kitchen window as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the lace curtains. The weight of her speech the previous night had settled, but rather than exhaustion, she felt something entirely new. Purpose. The words she had shared, the applause from the audience, and the countless faces that had looked at her with admiration. These were moments she never thought she'd experience. Yet the echoes of that night weren't all comforting. The community's reaction to the cafe incident and her public story wasn't universally positive. Even after the town hall's resounding success, divisions persisted. Rosa knew that change wouldn't come overnight. It wasn't just about her story, but about the larger conversation her experience had sparked. As she prepared breakfast for Sophia, the news played faintly in the background. Stories of the town hall dominated the local station, interspersed with debates from commentators and interviews with attendees. While some praised the unity and determination the event had inspired, others criticized it as overly sentimental or an unnecessary focus on a minor incident. "Mom," Sophia said softly, interrupting Rosa's thoughts. "Do people still think bad things about us?" Rosa knelt to meet her daughter's gaze. "Some people might, mi amor. But there are many more who see us for who we are, not just where we come from." Sophia nodded solemnly, her young mind wrestling with concepts far beyond her years. Rosa hugged her tightly, vowing to shield her daughter as much as she could while teaching her resilience. Later that day, Rosa found herself standing outside the cafe where it had all begun. The manager, Emily, had reached out to invite her back for a special meeting, a gathering of employees and customers meant to address the incident and create a more inclusive atmosphere. Rosa hesitated for a moment, the memories of that morning rushing back. But then she took a deep breath and stepped inside. The room was small but packed with people. Emily greeted her warmly, introducing her to the staff and several regular customers. Among them was Mr. Dawson, who gave Rosa an encouraging nod. The meeting began with Emily addressing the staff, her tone earnest. "What happened here wasn't just about one person being rude," she said. "It was a reflection of something bigger, something we need to change. And that starts with us." Rosa listened as employees shared their thoughts, some admitting they hadn't known how to respond during the incident, while others expressed regret for staying silent. Then Emily turned to Rosa. "Rosa," she said, "you've inspired so many people, including me. I'd like you to share what this experience has meant to you and what you think we can do to make this cafe and this community a better place." Rosa felt a familiar flutter of nerves but steadied herself. "When I came here that morning, I just wanted a coffee and a quiet moment," she began. "But what happened showed me how powerful our words and actions can be, both for good and for harm." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of those who listened intently. "I believe this cafe can be more than just a place to get coffee. It can be a space where people feel welcome, no matter where they're from or what language they speak." The room erupted in applause, and Emily smiled. "I couldn't agree more," she said. "That's why we're launching Cafe Together, a new program where we'll host weekly language exchange nights and cultural events. And Rosa, we'd like you to be a part of it." Rosa was taken aback. Me? But I'm still learning. Emily nodded. That's exactly why you're perfect. Who better to inspire others than someone who's walking the same path? Rosa agreed, though her heart raced at the thought of taking on such a visible role. The program launched the following week, and the cafe transformed into a vibrant hub of activity. People from all backgrounds gathered to share their stories, teach each other new phrases, and celebrate the cultures that made their community unique. One evening, as Rosa helped set up for a language exchange night, a familiar face entered the cafe. It was the heckler. Rosa froze, unsure of how to react. He approached her cautiously, his hands shoved into his pockets. "Hi," he said awkwardly. "I heard about this program, and I thought I'd check it out." Rosa studied him for a moment, searching his face for any hint of mockery. But instead, she saw something unexpected: sincerity. "I want to apologize again," he continued. "I know I've said it before, but seeing all of this, it's made me realize how wrong I was. I want to learn, to be better." Rosa nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. "It takes courage to admit that." As the weeks went by, the heckler became a regular at Cafe Together events. He shared his own struggles, how he had grown up in a family that dismissed anything different as a threat, and how breaking free from that mindset was a daily challenge. His journey mirrored Rosa's in ways she hadn't anticipated, and an unlikely camaraderie formed between them. Meanwhile, Rosa's role in the community continued to grow. She began volunteering at the community center, helping new immigrants navigate the challenges of settling into a new country. Her English improved steadily, and with each passing day, she felt more confident in her ability to connect with others. But her newfound visibility also brought challenges. Some people accused her of seeking attention or taking advantage of the cafe incident to gain sympathy. Rosa struggled with the criticism, but she reminded herself of what Mr. Dawson had told her. When you stand up for what's right, not everyone will agree. But that doesn't mean you stop. One particularly difficult day, Rosa received a letter in the mail. It was from an older woman named Margaret, who lived on the other side of town. Margaret wrote about how she had grown up in a time when divisions between people were even more stark, and how Rosa's story had inspired her to reflect on her own biases. "I want you to know," the letter read, "that you've opened my eyes. I'm trying to be better, and that's because of you." Rosa held the letter close, tears streaming down her face. It was a reminder that even in the face of criticism, her story was making a difference. Months later, the cafe incident felt like a distant memory, but its impact continued to ripple through the community. Rosa's dream of opening a bakery was closer than ever, thanks to the support of friends, neighbors, and strangers who believed in her vision. And while the journey had been anything but easy, Rosa knew she wouldn't trade it for anything. One evening, as she and Sophia walked through the neighborhood, they passed a mural that had recently been painted on the side of a building. It depicted a group of people from all walks of life, standing together with the words "Stronger Together" painted boldly above them. Sophia tugged on her mother's hand. "Mama, that's like us." Rosa smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Yes, mi amor, it is." As they stood there, Rosa reflected on how far she had come. From a quiet woman trying to blend into the background to a voice for change in her community. And while the road ahead was still uncertain, she knew one thing for sure. She would keep walking it, hand in hand with her daughter, one step at a time. Months had passed since Rosa's quiet life was thrown into the spotlight, and though the world around her seemed calmer, the changes within her and her community continued to ripple outward. The cafe incident, once an isolated moment of humiliation, had become a cornerstone of a growing movement in the city, one of inclusion, understanding, and shared humanity. For Rosa, every day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to embrace the person she was becoming. On a warm spring morning, Rosa walked Sophia to school, their routine now infused with a deeper connection. The mural they passed daily had become a cherished landmark for both of them, a symbol of the progress their community had made. Sophia, now more confident in her own abilities, often pointed to the figures in the mural as if they were family. "Ma'am," she said one morning, skipping alongside Rosa, "do you think I can help people like you do when I grow up?" Rosa knelt down, cupping Sophia's face in her hands. "Mi amor, you already help people just by being yourself. But yes, I believe you will do even more." Sophia grinned, her smile lighting up the morning. Rosa felt a pang of gratitude that her daughter had inherited her courage, though she often wondered how much of it Sophia had inspired in her. Later that day, Rosa prepared for a special meeting at the community center. The director had invited her to share her experiences with a group of city leaders who were working to expand resources for immigrants. Rosa's nerves fluttered as she practiced her talking points in front of the mirror. Public speaking was no longer as terrifying as it had been, but each new audience brought its own set of anxieties. At the meeting, the room buzzed with anticipation. City officials, nonprofit leaders, and business owners filled the seats, their notebooks and tablets ready to capture the insights of those directly impacted by their decisions. When Rosa took the stage, the room quieted, and all eyes turned to her. She took a deep breath, grounding herself in the truth she had learned. Her voice mattered. "Good afternoon," Rosa began, her tone steady and warm. "When I first came to this country, I felt invisible. Not because people didn't see me, but because they didn't see who I really was. They only saw my accent, my struggles with English, my job. But over these months, I've learned that invisibility is a choice others make about us, and it's a choice we can challenge." The room remained silent as Rosa shared her story, not just the cafe incident, but the countless small indignities and triumphs that had shaped her journey. She spoke of her fears, her hopes, and the community that had rallied around her. As she concluded, she looked directly at the city officials seated in the front row. "We don't want pity," she said firmly. "We want opportunities. Opportunities to learn, to grow, and to contribute. We are part of this city, and we want to make it better for everyone." The applause that followed was thunderous, and several attendees rose to their feet. Rosa felt a mix of pride and relief as she stepped down from the stage. She had done what she set out to do: share her truth and inspire action. After the meeting, a man approached her, his suit impeccable and his demeanor professional yet warm. "Ms. Rosa," he said, extending a hand, "I'm Councilman Rivera. Your speech was incredibly moving. I'd like to discuss ways we can work together to expand these opportunities you spoke about." Rosa shook his hand, her mind racing. "Thank you," she said. "I would be honored." In the weeks that followed, Rosa found herself working closely with Councilman Rivera and his team. Together, they developed initiatives to support immigrant families, including scholarships for English classes, mentorship programs, and partnerships with local businesses to provide job training. Rosa's role was unofficial. She wasn't a policymaker or a professional advocate, but her lived experience and passion made her an invaluable voice at the table. Meanwhile, Cafe Together continued to thrive. The weekly language exchange nights became a cornerstone of the community, drawing people from all backgrounds. Rosa often found herself at the center of these gatherings, not as an organizer, but as a friend and confidant to those navigating their own journeys. The cafe, once just a place for coffee, had become a sanctuary, a testament to what was possible when people chose connection over division. One evening, as Rosa prepared to leave the cafe, Emily stopped her. "Rosa, can I talk to you for a minute?" Rosa nodded, curious. Emily led her to a quiet corner and handed her an envelope. "This is for you," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. Rosa opened the envelope to find a letter from a local grant committee. Her eyes widened as she read the words, "Congratulations, your application for the Small Business Development Grant has been approved." Tears filled Rosa's eyes as she looked up at Emily. "How did this happen?" she whispered. Emily smiled. "You've been talking about opening your bakery for months, so I took the liberty of submitting an application on your behalf. I hope that's okay." Rosa laughed through her tears, overcome with gratitude. "Okay. This is more than okay." I don't even have the words. Over the next few months, Rosa worked tirelessly to bring her dream to life. With the grant money and the support of her community, she secured a small storefront in a bustling part of town. The space needed work, but Rosa saw its potential. She poured her heart into every detail, from the menu to the decor, determined to create a bakery that would feel like home to anyone who walked through the door. The grand opening of Pan y Corazon, Bread and Heart, was a celebration of everything Rosa had fought for. The cafe was packed with friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had followed her story. Sophia beamed with pride as she helped her mother cut the ribbon, and Mr. Dawson stood by, his eyes brimming with pride. As Rosa welcomed the first customers, she felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known. This bakery wasn't just a business. It was a symbol of resilience, community, and the power of standing up for oneself. But even as Rosa celebrated this milestone, she knew her work wasn't finished. The challenges facing immigrants in her city and beyond were far from over, and Rosa was determined to keep advocating for change. She continued to speak at events, mentor others, and collaborate with leaders like Councilman Rivera. One evening, as Rosa sat in the bakery after closing, Sophia joined her at the counter. "Mom," she said, her voice soft, "are you happy?" Rosa smiled, pulling her daughter close. "I am, mi amor, because I'm doing what I love and I'm helping others. And because I have you." Sophia rested her head on Rosa's shoulder, her small hand clutching her mother's. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the warmth and comfort of the bakery, Rosa felt a profound sense of peace. She had faced more than she ever thought she could handle, but she had emerged stronger, braver, and more determined than ever. As the moon rose high over the city, casting its gentle light on the mural down the street, Rosa made a silent promise: to keep fighting for a world where everyone, no matter their background, could find their place. Because she had learned that courage wasn't about never being afraid. It was about facing fear and choosing to move forward anyway. And with every step she took, Rosa knew she was paving the way for others to do the same. The sun had barely risen over the city when Rosa unlocked the doors to Pan y Corazon for another day. The smell of freshly baked bread and pastries filled the air, wrapping the small bakery in a warm embrace. It had been 6 months since the grand opening, and the space had grown into more than just a business. It had become a gathering place, a beacon of hope for the community Rosa had come to love so deeply. Customers arrived steadily throughout the morning, greeting Rosa with smiles and warm words. Many of them were regulars now, neighbors, friends, and even a few tourists who had heard about the bakery's story. Rosa greeted each person by name when she could, a habit she had picked up from her years working service jobs. It was her way of showing gratitude, of reminding people they mattered. But behind the counter, the day carried a weight Rosa hadn't shared with anyone yet. That evening, she was scheduled to speak at a citywide conference on diversity and inclusion. It was the largest audience she had ever faced, and the pressure was almost overwhelming. Rosa knew that this opportunity wasn't just about her. It was about giving a voice to the countless others who shared her journey. After the morning rush, Rosa took a break in the small kitchen at the back of the bakery. She pulled out her notes for the speech, scribbled with last-minute edits and reminders. As she read through them, doubt crept in. Was her story enough? Could her words truly make a difference? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the bell above the bakery door. Rosa stepped out to find Mr. Dawson standing near the counter, his familiar warm smile easing some of her tension. He held a small bouquet of wildflowers in his hands. "These are for you," he said, setting the flowers on the counter. "I thought you could use a little encouragement today." Rosa smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Mr. Dawson. I've been feeling nervous." He nodded knowingly. "Nerves are just proof that you care, Rosa. And that's what makes your story powerful. You've already inspired so many people. Tonight will be no different." Rosa took a deep breath, letting his words settle her unease. "I hope you're right," she said. As the day went on, Rosa kept herself busy, focusing on the rhythm of the bakery. Sophia joined her after school, her presence a welcome distraction from the looming speech. Together, they worked on decorating cookies for the next day, Sophia's laughter filling the space. "Ma'am," Sophia said as she carefully piped icing onto a cookie, "are you going to tell them about the cafe tonight?" Rosa paused, considering the question. "Yes," she said finally, "but not just about that. I want them to understand what it means to keep trying, even when it's hard." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "Like you always tell me, we don't give up." "Exactly," Rosa said, smiling at her daughter's wisdom. That evening, Rosa arrived at the conference venue, her heart pounding as she stepped into the bustling auditorium. The crowd was larger than she had imagined. Hundreds of people, from students to business leaders to local activists. The stage, illuminated by bright lights, seemed almost impossibly far away. As Rosa waited backstage, she overheard snippets of the earlier speakers' presentations. They spoke about policies, statistics, and strategies. Important topics, but ones that felt distant from the lived realities Rosa wanted to share. She took another deep breath, clutching the edges of her notes. She reminded herself of Mr. Dawson's words. Nerves meant she cared. When her name was announced, the applause that greeted her was thunderous. Rosa stepped onto the stage, blinking against the bright lights. The faces in the crowd blurred together, but she could feel their anticipation. She gripped the podium, grounding herself in the moment. "Good evening," Rosa began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I stand here today not as an expert, not as a politician, but as a person who has lived the experience we're here to talk about. My story isn't unique, but it's one that reflects the struggles and hopes of many in our community." She shared the story of the cafe, the humiliation, the defense from Mr. Dawson, and the moment her life changed. But Rosa didn't stop there. She spoke about the challenges she had faced long before that day, from the fear of leaving her home country to the constant pressure to prove her worth in a new one. She spoke about the small victories that had kept her going, Sophia's encouragement, the support of friends, and the growing community at the bakery. "What I've learned," Rosa said, her voice growing stronger, "is that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about standing up, even when fear is present. It's about choosing to believe in yourself and in others, even when the world gives you every reason not to." The audience was silent, hanging on her every word. Rosa continued, speaking about the changes she had seen in her community, the new programs, the connections formed at Cafe Together, and the stories of resilience that others had shared with her. "These changes didn't happen because of me," Rosa said. "They happened because of us, because people chose to come together, to listen, to learn, and to act. That's what makes a community strong." As she concluded, Rosa posed a question to the audience. What kind of community do you want to create? And what are you willing to do to make it a reality? The applause that followed was deafening, and as Rosa stepped off the stage, she felt a sense of relief and accomplishment, unlike anything she had ever known. After the event, attendees approached Rosa to share their gratitude and admiration. Some spoke about their own experiences with exclusion and resilience, while others asked how they could support initiatives like Cafe Together. Among them was Councilman Rivera, who praised Rosa for her honesty and courage. "You've given this city a gift," he said, "and I hope you'll continue to share it." That night, as Rosa walked home with Sophia, the weight of the day finally began to lift. The city streets were quiet, the air cool and crisp. Sophia held Rosa's hand tightly, her small voice breaking the silence. "Ma'am," she said, "I think tonight was your bravest day." Rosa smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Maybe it was," she said, "but I couldn't have done it without you." Back at the bakery, Rosa placed the bouquet of wildflowers from Mr. Dawson in a small vase on the counter. They seemed to glow in the moonlight, a reminder of the kindness and support that had carried her through the hardest moments. As she prepared for bed, Rosa reflected on how far she had come, from a woman trying to remain invisible to a voice for change in her community. The journey wasn't over, and Rosa knew there would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time, she felt truly prepared to face them. Because she wasn't just doing it for herself. She was doing it for Sophia, for her community, and for everyone who needed to believe that courage could lead to something beautiful. And as she drifted off to sleep, Rosa made a silent promise. To keep standing up, to keep sharing her story, and to keep building a world where everyone had the chance to be seen, heard, and valued.